Good afternoon, and welcome back to Watching Washington. It's Friday, April 21st, and I'm John Henry Henson.
And I'm Allie Ortiz. Today's show is going to look a little different, but we are very excited. Here in the studio, we have a few special guests to discuss and spread awareness about some crucial political topics.
That's right. Joining us today is a panel full of Purdue's Political Discourse Club. These students have a passion for politics and are well-versed on pressing issues from both perspectives.
We are excited to welcome Patrick Peterson, Shreya Jain, Jose Gutierrez, and Leighton Rosen. Thank you all for being here today.
Our first topic we'll be talking about today is student loan forgiveness. As many of you all know, the Biden administration recently proposed that students, or those with student loans, have the opportunity to have up to $10,000 in student debt relief if they make under $125,000 a year. What are your thoughts on this? Is this something that is sustainable? Is this fair?
I personally think it's a good idea. A lot of students have a lot of anxiety surrounding student loans. And this also determines a lot of what students major in, whether or not they have an interest in it, based on how much money they might make from it in the future and whether or not they can pay off their student loans from it. So I think that this particular proposal would give students a lot more choice and a lot more freedom during their college years to really have a holistic experience and to experience those 4 years to the fullest, the way people say they can if they really try.
Yeah, I don't think it's fair or anything, but doesn't mean I'm against it, right? Mm-hmm. I think it's essentially very similar to how a parent may treat their younger child differently than their older child, allow them certain things at a younger age, and an older child might feel a little upset about it, as many Americans do. In the case with student loans, they'll think, hey, I didn't get this sort of forgiveness. I had to pay all my loans all the way through. Why don't they? And that can breed a lot of resentment. But ultimately, I think people should look at it and as a darn, I wish I got that, but good for them sort of headspace. I'm certainly for it. It's still a Band-Aid. I don't think it addresses the fundamental structural issues that cause such debilitating student debt in this country, but I think it's a good start.
I agree with that for sure.
I agree completely with what Leighton said. I think that in the end, it's not about how fair this single motion is. It's about the fact that there's an issue and we just need to solve it quickly. I would maybe like to see something as sort of just a token to those that have already paid off, maybe like a tax credit equal to what we're giving in student loan relief. But I would say that it's relief in the fact that it's a relief of federal loans by the federal government. It's just like if your bank decides to forgive or change your mortgage terms a little bit. It's the person that's doing the loan, person that's servicing the loan, changing the terms of the loan. And I think that in itself is completely fair and legal.
For sure. I think what Leighton had to say was great, but I think that we still have a long ways to go when it comes to student loan forgiveness. I know people who are still struggling to pay off their student loans 20 years into their occupation, and I don't think that's a fair system for anyone.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the education system itself has become so capitalist in the sense that only the people who are able to afford it are able to get a higher education is a fundamental problem. And this is definitely a Band-Aid, and other things need to be addressed, but it is a step forward. And the fact that the Biden administration is thinking about education in that way, I think is a good thing.
Right, so this topic has definitely raised a fierce national debate on whether, it's fair, sustainable, like John Henry said, and it's definitely raised that amongst policymakers as well as academics and loan borrowers alike. So some of you may or may not know, but former Purdue president Mitch Daniels has made some comments about the student loan forgiveness plan. And he has been quoted remarking that the student loan forgiveness is essentially not only morally wrong, but also illegal. So what do you make of Daniel's comments and his views, as well as do you agree, disagree?
Well, when President Daniels was a senator for Indiana, his main role there was to balance the books, and he was huge in budgeting in the administration that he served in. And so I think that his comments come from that idea, but the fact that under his presidency of Purdue, student tuition has been frozen for as long as it has been, even though you will find some students advocating for a higher student tuition because it means that we get like a better quality of life here at Purdue. I think that maybe he disagrees with some of the ways that this is being carried out, but I don't necessarily think that means that student loan forgiveness is illegal or immoral, because he himself has kept Purdue student tuition frozen for that long.
Right.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what Shreya said, but I can also totally understand where Mitch is coming from on that. I mean, that's very on brand for him as both president of our university and as a politician. He's very much kind of like the old, like, keep the books tight, you know, keep government small kind of Republican. And I don't think it's illegal in the way that he means it to, you know, give some student loan forgiveness. But I can understand, maybe not agree, but understand where he's coming from with immoral. It's certainly unfair. And that sounds really bad, but, you know, you can't always be fair.
Personally speaking, I really respect Mitch Daniels. I believe that he did a lot of good things while he was governor and did a lot of good things while he was president. For example, frozen tuition. I wouldn't be here if the tuition wasn't frozen. But I also do think that on this specific case, his judgment might be a little bit clouded simply because he's looking at it from the viewpoint of it's a part of the budget that we're having to give up for this. Whereas I see it, and a lot of people that support it in a economic sense see it as it's not money that the government is giving away. It's money that the government has already given away, and they're just saying you don't have to pay it back because you're doing something beneficial for the country. You're providing a service. And that's happened multiple times for like business bailouts and bank bailouts. They've decided that that loan does not need to be paid back. For World War II, we decided that the loans that we gave to Britain and France did not need to be paid back in full because they were our allies and they provided us a service. So since we're providing a service, that is in terms payment for the loan.
Without a doubt. And I think you all bring up a lot of really interesting and valid points. However, Mitch Daniels is accompanied by a lot of other critics, many of which believe that these student loan forgiveness packages, especially being pushed by the Biden administration currently, will benefit those with advanced degrees, such as doctors and lawyers, who are more likely to have higher salaries and capacities for paying off their student loans above others. How do you think that these student loan forgiveness packages and ideas should be structured so that they're helping to relieve debt for those who need it most?
I think that we talked about how it's sort of a Band-Aid for these issues earlier, and them being structured in such a way is definitely part of the fact that it is a Band-Aid and not a solution. So it's definitely important to see like where exactly this money is going and how it can be restructured. If this is the first of many student loan forgiveness packages to be rolled out by the administration, then I think it's all right to have this as sort of a trial run of sorts, and then have more comprehensive packages as you find out what people need and what kinds of students need it the most, what their majors may be, if they're doctors or lawyers, or if they're not. So I think that it depends really on what this package looks like and how it's rolled out.
Yeah, I don't know if I have the authority or the know-how to solve the issue on my own, but I think it's important to maybe take a diagnostic of the country and what the issue is we're trying to solve. And we talk about people getting advanced degrees. A lot of people who go and get advanced degrees, both statistically and anecdotally, are people in STEM fields that already pay good dividends on the money you're paying for your degree, maybe the loans you're taking out. A lot of people struggle in a lot of liberal arts and arts fields, which may contribute just as much to society as a STEM field would, but don't contribute the same amount economically, which is a lot of what college and advanced degrees are right now. Additionally, in STEM, a lot of the time your advanced degree is getting paid for. In liberal arts and basically anything that's not STEM, you're paying for your advanced degree, and that compounds the amount that you're paying in your student loans and how your loans grow over time. It's difficult from a government perspective to maybe shift our attention away from people who are doctors, who are engineers, and towards people who are artists, who are musicians, who are writers, who are historians, who maybe don't provide exciting new products or other things that generate revenue for our country. And it's especially hard for taxpayer perspective to say, hey, your taxes are going towards subsidizing someone who maybe graduated 3 years ago and hasn't found a job yet. It's difficult, but I think it can be helped by not viewing college as this kind of economic return as it so often is. I'm sure, we're all college students. We've heard that a lot when we were applying. It's all about, not all about, but a lot of adults will tell you it's about the money you can make back. And as long as we have that perspective, I think it's going to be really difficult to really shift to help those who need it.
Just to add on to that, whenever you look back in history to find out what things were going on, you always find artists or, literary authors or poets who talk about social and political issues that they're facing. Sure, there were a lot of inventions and things that were made, and those things can be dated back. They really helped us advance. I'm not saying they didn't. But to really look at what people were facing back then, you look at the liberal arts.
As someone who represents both, or hopes to represent, both the liberal arts degrees that Leighton talked about that sort of pay their own way, and the sort of upper advanced degrees that will need to pay their own way in the future. I would like to be a lawyer next year. I'm hoping to head on to law school. And I would just say that this plan specifically, first off, I don't believe that this plan as it is right now should be repeated. This is just a Band-Aid. Consider it part of COVID. We were just hit so hard with COVID that we just need one piece of forgiveness in this fashion, and then we'll figure out something better later. But for lawyers and people going to medical school, everyone's getting a flat $10,000. And for me, that $10,000 is super helpful. But I'm also looking at not just the cost of my 4-year degree, but I'm also looking at the cost of my advanced degree. The advanced degree isn't free. I'm not getting that better paying job for free. My law school degree is going to cost exponentially more than my degree at Purdue did. So $10,000 in the long run for those advanced degrees, I would slightly disagree with the statement of the question in that people that have to pay extra for those degrees aren't getting as much proportionally out of their student debt. People that have a 4-year degree will get more out of that $10,000 than people that have to pay for a 6 or 7-year degree.
Yeah, as the only STEM major between the 4 of us, I definitely recognize, here, especially at Purdue, the lack of care that I see through the liberal arts program. We only have one building here. And so I think that as a smaller community here, it's easier to see that through the lens of, well, we're an engineering school, we're a STEM school. It's harder for us to see the bigger picture when it comes to other schools, for example, Notre Dame, where they're more focused on liberal arts and trying to get those people through the system, through law school and stuff. So I think kind of widening the view on different communities, different colleges will then help further stabilize the picture a bit, if that makes sense.
Definitely.
Yeah, well, it's safe to say that we've already heard lots of interesting takes, but the show is just getting started.
That's right. Stay tuned for insights on important issues such as abortion rights and internet privacy. That's next on Watching Washington.
The Center for C-SPAN, which is this organization, the CCSC, what we do is we facilitate a bunch of organizations, different programs for Brian Lamb, which is the founder of C-SPAN. Anyone can be part of CCSC, whether it be through our various internships, our competitions, just to be involved, even our student community meetings that we have every week. Anyone can go. You don't have to be communications or poli-sci. You just meet so many people. The connections you make is kind of crazy, the range that CCSC has. So yeah, it's just provided me so many opportunities to kind of achieve the goals I have personally and forward to whatever career paths I choose.
Imagine a world where Olympics and Paralympics are unified as one, and where all athletes at all levels have equal opportunities to play and perform at their full potential.
Athletics has been such an influential and transformative aspect of my life. So to me, RISE is about ensuring that every person that has the desire to participate in sport has the opportunity to do so.
This organization is about recognition. We believe in recognizing excellence where it is found, especially in Paralympic sports.
RISE is about driving change in our community and beyond. We hope that through our events and initiatives, we can galvanize people for our cause and inspire them to create an ever-growing network to help achieve our mission.
It's about connecting people of various backgrounds and who truly care about creating meaningful change together.
We develop projects and hold events to bring people together at the interface of inclusivity, sports, and engineering.
Our goal is to promote the equality of all sports and to improve sports performance and accessibility.
Join us so that you can have a major contribution in creating meaningful change.
Hello, and I'm Madeline Brode. Welcome back. Our issue debate continues with another hot topic this past year, abortion rights. I'd like to now ask the panel, how do you feel about the Dobbs decision to remove the constitutional protection of abortion and move that power to the states?
I personally think that it was not a good decision to be made. I think I'm pro-choice. I think that a woman should be able to choose whether or not she wants to continue with the pregnancy. And I think that when you say pro-choice, a lot of people tend to think that, oh, you want to get an abortion, and pro-choice means that you need an abortion, whereas pro-choice just means the right to choose whether or not you want to do it. There was an important case by Ruth Bader Ginsburg sort of heralded, where she advocated for a woman to be able to keep her child, and she's a pro-choice advocate. So I think that having this decision reversed, having the Dobbs reversed, it just takes away constitutional rights. It takes away a woman's right to choose, and some of the way that states are implementing this or making use of this, like Texas, where women really just are at mercy of the state, no matter what their situation may be. And ectopic pregnancies, sometimes they're saying women can be put in jail if they need to get rid of an ectopic pregnancy, even though that pregnancy is not viable and it could kill a woman. So I don't agree with this decision at all.
It's a really tough issue morally. Legally, I'm no constitutional or Supreme Court scholar, but while it can be argued that the grounds for which Roe was struck down was shaky, ultimately it was legal. There was sufficient evidence and argument for it. What's really unfortunate here is that our rights are entrusted with the Supreme Court and not with our representation in the government, because the Supreme Court isn't meant to represent us. That's what Congress is for. And it leaves us in this state where our rights can be taken away so easily by 9 people, right? And that's really scary not only when you look at the situation we're in right now, but when you look at how Roe v. Wade set precedents for other issues, such as interracial marriage, which is ironic considering Clarence Thomas was married to a white woman. But that's my main issue, is that it happened in the courts at all.
Yeah, I mean that's what makes it so hard, is that it was legal, and that it was shaky, but it was a legal thing to do.
Personally speaking, I'm with Leighton. I'm really sort of shaken by the fact that it was legislation by the courts. I'm not really a fan of it, but throughout our history, there have been multiple times where the legislative branch has been so gridlocked that in the end, it came down to the courts to make a decision. We can see it with segregation. We can see it with the election in 2000. A lot of the time, because our legislative system is so partisan and so divided, it comes to the courts to make a decision, which is not their job. They shouldn't be making that decision. So in the end, I would not have liked to see Roe v. Wade go away, but I also don't believe that it should have been started in the courts to begin with. I believe that Roe v. Wade should have been a codified law beforehand.
Yeah, bingo. That's been such a huge issue with the Democrats.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like they can hang it like a carrot over your head, being like, vote for us and we'll legalize this. But when they had time, they didn't.
I don't have a dog in the fight, but I mean, it's been going on for so long. And only now there's this big push to codify things like gay marriage recently. But I think if it's been that long, you can't just place the blame on the Supreme Court when you've had 50 years to codify it and nothing's happened at all.
And it becomes a huge topic during every election, where it's like, if you want your abortion rights, then vote for this party, but we haven't really seen much change with that.
Well, I would say the question becomes, could they even have codified it to begin with? Because even though it's been 50 years, one could certainly make the argument that any codification of Roe v. Wade would not pass our current Congress. Despite how far we've gone and despite how used to the rights that Roe gave women we are, we're still at a point where there's no guarantee that any codification would have reached Congress. I believe that they should have tried, but if they had tried and failed, that might have forced the Supreme Court to check Roe v. Wade a lot sooner, and that might have ruined it a lot sooner.
You don't think any point, really? You don't think at any point since then you would have had that possible?
I think we've had a majority enough to be able to pass it.
Yeah, maybe the Obama administration.
Possibly. But there are also a couple moderate Democrats that, out of the fact that they were coming from a red state, probably would not have voted in a safe year or in an unsafe year, depending on the electoral calculations we've seen before. They change their opinions based on electoral calculations. And they might have calculated, this year, I just can't afford to support this, even if they were Democrat, even if the Democrats had a 5-seat majority in the Senate. If those 5 seats are moderates and they think that they can't win an election, if they say that, they might decide that they don't want to codify it this time. They might just put it off and say, oh, it's already safe in the Supreme Court, which is what we've been seeing.
I do believe that before Trump's era, it would have been a lot easier to codify this into law.
Possibly.
You guys have brought up a lot of good points on how this complicates things. Do you think it'll complicate court decisions specifically as things are brought to individual states? How do you think that's going to play out?
I think one big thing that a lot of people saw was kind of the lack of trust in our court system, not just on the state level, but also on the federal level. I think we're starting to realize that our voices need to be heard in a much larger scale. And so I'm not the biggest fan of the states making the decisions. I'd rather have the federal government make the decisions for the people. And in this decision especially, I think it was a horrible decision to let the states make the decision on abortion rights.
And when you think about future court decisions, interracial marriage and LGBTQ has already been brought up before, but I think that those are some of the decisions that are first on the chopping block. Those are some of the ones that are going to be complicated the most by the overturning of Roe v. Wade. And you also see that it complicates future healthcare too, because women aren't able to receive the healthcare that they need now. And they're also not able to receive the contraceptives that maybe they use for hormone control, not even for birth control necessarily. And attacks on, Planned Parenthood, institutions such as Planned Parenthood, I think that complicates healthcare in a way that, maybe some people imagined it would, but really experiencing it and living it is really, really difficult, especially if you're in a red state. But for court decisions, I do think interracial marriage and gay marriage are going to be complicated the most.
These are all great points, and one thing that you brought up, I'd love to even dive deeper into. A Texan federal judge recently invalidated the FDA's approval of the abortion drug mifepristone. How do you guys think this will affect the already stringent issue of abortion across the United States as the United States, is seeing pushback from both sides of the aisle on this decision?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the whole abortion pills issue is blowing up right now, and you'll see across the country several states, CVS, even if it's legal technically for them to sell it, they won't because they're trying to save their own skin. It's a liability issue. And as you see, as healthcare has become increasingly, monopolized and conglomerated into these massive pharmaceutical companies, whose only interest really is to protect their own profits, you're going to see that women are going to have a harder and harder time accessing reproductive health items, anything that could possibly get a pharmacy or a clinic in trouble, even if it's still legal, because there's always due to the volatility in the courts, the possibility that any day it couldn't be, and then all of a sudden they can get in a lot of trouble for selling it.
There's also, going off of what you said, there's been cases where contraceptives, so condoms and things, have been behind locked glass cases, so you have to go up and ask, and sometimes they just refuse to sell it to you. That depends on what state you're in, of course, and how red that state is. Mifepristone, if I'm not wrong, was Supreme Court said that places can still sell it, but they can't mail it. but that's only for a short amount of time. Again, it's like a Band-Aid. It's not really a solution to everything. And it's also just one pill. It's just mifepristone. So it really, I think healthcare is just affected so drastically. And women's healthcare has already sort of been just equate everything to hysteria or anxiety. And this just worsens that issue.
And this issue specifically, like I was angered by the Roe decision, but this decision made me more angry, less at the judge than at the government itself, because I believe it was the Comstock Act, which is an act from the late 1800s, meant it was brought up by a anti-vice crusader under 1800s sort of social norms. And it was utilized in this court hearing to say, well, we said back in the 1800s that you could never mail anything that could help with abortion, even though that law has not been enforced seriously since the 1930s. I got really mad that Congress had basically not done its job and removed that bill completely. They removed part of it in the 1970s, relating it to contraceptives like condoms, but it just boggles the mind that we still have a law on the books from the 1800s that Congress has not taken the time to remove yet, when everybody else just stopped listening to it.
Ankles are visible. Oh no.
This also attacks lower income communities because we see time and time again people trying to find contraceptives, people trying to find different alternatives to like these problems, and abortions are not a cheap procedure. And so these pills are helpful for people that want to get an abortion, but they don't want to spend as much money to get an abortion, or that they can't wait to spend that money. And so it's just targeting lower income families, communities, which then is also targeting communities of minorities. And then it just becomes this slope of just constant targeting of lower income families.
Yeah, there was a study that a journalist did where she traveled along with a woman who was trying to get an abortion. She had to travel out of Texas because she was currently in Texas. So she had to pay for gas to drive. She had to pay for a hotel for like a night or two. She had to pay for a babysitter because she already had 2 children. She had to pay for the abortion pill itself. And then she had to pay to get back. So it's really not just the abortion procedure, it's the process of getting an abortion if you can't get it in the state that you currently live in.
Well, this has been a good discussion, but we're going to move on to our next topic. I am Ellie Aker from Watching Washington, here to discuss social media privacy. So there's been a lot going on in the social media privacy world the past few months and the past few years with the increase in social media use and data use. So do you believe the government should have the authority to regulate social media to protect privacy?
Go ahead.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Well, that's a complicated question. And I think that my answer to that has changed over the last few years as we've seen the landscape of the internet change a lot. Generally, I like the government to keep their hands off the internet. I think it was an invention born of the people, and it's essentially our public forum. To allow the government too much control of it will stifle us and ultimately be bad for public discourse. We've seen TikTok recently has been a huge center
Yeah,
of
that's
this.
what I was going to talk about and bring up in one of our points is
Gotcha.
how Montana just recently brought up a TikTok ban where you would be fined for having the app. So what's your thoughts as it relates to the privacy there?
God, I believe they don't really care about privacy. I think that's a total red herring. I think at least with TikTok specifically, the fear of TikTok is born out of xenophobia. It's a Chinese app. They're going to steal your information. Everyone's stealing our information.
Exactly.
Our information is available to anyone who wants it or is willing to pay for it. I'm no cybersecurity expert, but it is not hard to get your advertising data, your interests. If you look on Instagram, if you click a few buttons, you can see that it keeps an entire catalog that basically describes everything you're interested in with a few keywords. It's to pretend that we can keep our data on social media and the internet like totally secure and away from the government's eyes or any social media's eyes is kind of naive. We stood on a precipice of that like 10 years ago and we have fallen off.
I agree. I mean, the government seems to be okay with it when American social media is stealing your data. But the second it's a Chinese company stealing your data, like you said, it's born out of xenophobia. I think TikTok's just one of the things that's caught in between U.S.-China diplomatic relations. It has no business, testifying in Congress the way it did. It has no business being banned. Even the way that Purdue banned it. Purdue already has so much of our data. We're students at Purdue. So the fact that, they think TikTok is going to sort of, I don't know, steal more data somehow than Facebook or Instagram or the other things already are, I don't know how that really works. And it also, during the hearings when the CEO of TikTok was testifying, he made some very clear points about how whatever data TikTok does have is in the hands of American companies. It's not like that data is shipped back to China for China to do whatever they want with it. So I think that's an important point here too.
Personally speaking, I am careful not to use any social media past LinkedIn for work. But I do believe that everybody should have the right to be on a social media site to talk to people that they want. I believe what you believe. I believe the internet should be sort of net neutral. It should be just sort of left on its own. The government should regulate it on things like threats of violence or actual videos of violence. Anything to keep that off the web. But that's normal in actual free speech. Like if you threaten someone out in public, you can get charged with a threat of violence. That's not an infringement on your free speech in real life, so it wouldn't be an infringement on your free speech online. So past just making sure that the language online remains in that free speech sort of area, I do believe that the government should just keep its paws off of it.
Yeah, and as Sherry was saying, a lot of the data that goes through TikTok has to go through factories in Texas. So they're processing that data, and then whatever China wants, they can grab from that. But it has to go through a legal process before it can even get to that step. I think a problem that I'm seeing mostly with this is kind of the lack of faith in our economy. We see that there's TikTok, a Chinese company that's being successful. So we have to say, ban it, get rid of it, because we have the American version, Instagram Reels, who can do the exact same thing and get all that money whenever it gets banned.
An example of that is also a couple years ago, India banned TikTok completely from everywhere. And I think that that's just it was very clear then that it's caught in between the diplomatic relations between India and China. And so the fact that in the US they're trying to spin it as oh, they're stealing your data, it's just really a shaky argument.
To be fair, I think there are some points where, and I'm not well researched on this topic either, where there is some concern because of instances like the Chinese spy balloon and other sketchy things that have come from the Chinese Communist Party, where some politicians or people who work hard on this policy are concerned about it. I heard Keith Kroc, who's a Purdue grad and is big on tech diplomacy, talk about it. And people like him do believe there are real concerns with that data. So yeah, all of your points are very valid as well, but want to keep in mind that there is some healthy skepticism around the Chinese Communist Party. And so I think that's where people may be coming from at times with that situation.
For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll reiterate or iterate, I'm no fan of the CCP at all.
Yeah.
And I think when we talk about the spy balloon and this whole debate around our privacy on the internet in general, it evokes, at least it's intended to evoke to the American public, this image of conflict, of potential spying in terms of a military conflict, in terms of military escalation. That's why the spy balloon was scary, because it was physical this time. But I don't think there's a real actual threat, at least in terms of our cybersecurity, of a physical, use of this data. There is a war, but it's totally economic. There's this constant economic conflict with China we've been having for decades, and that's what they're using the data for. And I think, obviously, I don't want another country to beat us, in the economic war either, but I think that's much more fair game than an actual military conflict would be.
And also, sorry.
You can go.
Okay. And also on that, again, I'm no fan of the CCP either, but this spy balloon, this is something that has happened and been happening for a very long time. This is just one of the ones that got caught. It was just flying a little too low, was seen by people, got caught. But the spy balloon and these military strategies and techniques have been around for a very long time, and they've been implemented for a very, very long time, even before Obama was president. So it really goes to show that it's only the things that people can see that really create a whole ruckus the way that this one did. But like he said, economic game is much more fair play than the actual military war.
Yeah. I believe that our data should be kept out of the hands of the CCP as much as possible. I do believe that they are powerful enough that if they wanted to get our data from an American company like Google, they could probably just hack it and find our data. Mm-hmm. So the TikTok thing is just sort of a sideways thing, but I do want to take Jose's point about economics and sort of run with it. I have seen from the outside so many trends and so many sites and so many apps come and go in less than 10 years it's been now. Be Real was really big last semester, and now it's just sort of not. Snapchat was the big thing in my first part of my high school career, and then it became Instagram, and then it became TikTok real quick. It's just sort of been an ever-changing thing. So I think for the government to put its foot down on TikTok, like TikTok is the be-all and end-all threat, it's going to be a threat forever for the rest of time unless we do something about it now, that's just not how the internet works. Some other app, some other competitor will come along, offer something better, maybe within the next 2 years. TikTok is running out of time if we look at all the other apps and their heydays. TikTok's heyday is almost up. Somebody else will come up with something else.
That's a very good point. And this turned into a great discussion, not just about social media privacy, but also about foreign relations. So appreciate it, guys. We're going to take a short break, but more discussion is to come.
The 2024 presidential race, gun control, and civic literacy. We'll hear what our panel has to say on those topics right after this.
I mean, every year is different, but it hasn't changed that much. Our league is just ominous, and you better lace them up tight and be ready to play every night. If not, you're going to get beat.
Welcome back. We're going to be talking about the upcoming presidential race, but to introduce ourselves, my name again is Allie Ortiz.
And I'm Ashton Katie.
And so the first question I have for you guys is kind of important, but also simple. So who do you think the Republican nominee for president will be in 2024?
Ron DeSantis. It's going to be Ron DeSantis. That's my best guess. He seems to be really, networking the Republican Party. He seems to be the front runner so far.
As the only registered Republican in this room, I'm assuming. I don't know the anchors, but I would say from what I've seen, the calculus that I'm doing in my head is Donald Trump, 100%. I'm not. It's not necessarily because he's got a big majority in the Republican voter base. I don't think he does. But he's got just enough support with just his specific base that you can see it in the polls. His base remains relatively stable. His numbers don't sway very much because he's got a base of super loyal supporters. The people that are going to support Ron DeSantis are the other ones that aren't part of that base. It's up to Trump to maybe pick up a few of those if he needs to, but it's a first past the post system. He doesn't need 50%. He just needs to be the #1 candidate. And with all the candidates that have been announced so far, they're not taking voters away from Trump because the Trump voters are loyal to Trump. They're going to stay with Trump regardless. They're taking voters away from a possible Ron DeSantis run. And we just had one announced this morning. I completely forget his name. He's a pundit, a conservative pundit. But him, Nikki Haley, Mike Pence might jump in the race. I do believe that DeSantis head-on-head with Trump would have a chance. But DeSantis with just one other person that vote, that non-Trump vote can go to, that splits the vote and it gives Donald Trump the win just like it did in 2016. He didn't have 50% support, but he still won.
But in the recent polls that I've seen, Ron DeSantis is sort of pulling ahead of Trump. And even like Trump supporters are sort of moving to Ron DeSantis because, the indictment and everything.
Possibly. I think we'll see.
Okay.
I think you both have good points, but I think we're going to see a head-to-head, slug match like throwing everything they got between DeSantis and Trump.
I agree.
And I think what we're not looking at here is we talk a lot about these loyal, like bases for both different kinds of Republicans we're seeing for both of these candidates. But we're not talking about how not only does Donald Trump have really loyal followings amongst the voter base, he has a really loyal following in the government. So many Republican politicians who may have even initially really resisted him during the primary in 2016 became really loyal acolytes. That's your Ron DeSantis, your Chris Christie, your Ted Cruz. And even though he's in his fall from grace recently, some have started to escape his orbit. I think he's going to come back and like remind everyone who he is and who's in charge. I mean, at least who he thinks is in charge. He has recently returned to Instagram. He's trying to make a big return to form. He's like regaining some of his social media presence, even though he's got all this bad press recently. Like as we've learned in the last 8 years, he doesn't care.
Bad press doesn't
he does
matter.
not care, and I think his voters don't either. And I think we're going to see which one of those bases is bigger, and whether Ron DeSantis will be brought to heel when they are eventually brought into conflict.
I mean, he definitely goes by the logic that bad press is still press. You can see that for sure. But like I in the photos and videos that I've seen, at least, he seems to have a dwindling population like at his rallies or at his speeches now. So maybe he does make a return to form, but I think it will be a head-to-head match.
I also think that many young Republican voters are going to go more on the Ron DeSantis side just because they've seen what Trump has done. They know what he's like. And I think that there's just been this trend where more young voters are starting to come to the polls every year. And so I think they're going to start to kind of show their light in this race, especially.
I mean, as a Republican myself, I'm looking for an alternative. I'm waiting for someone to show up that could be an alternative. But I do think that in the end, the biggest base is going to be Trump's base.
Right. I definitely see where you all are coming from. And, on the opposite side of the aisle, we have some candidates who have announced their run for election. We have Marianne Williamson. Now we also potentially could have Joe Biden in the race. Do you think he will officially run for re-election?
I think he will. Against the advice of a lot of people in his orbit, I think he will. So it's going to be an interesting thing to see. I think we have a little bit more information about the Republicans than we do the Democrats so far, though.
Right.
Yeah, I think the age of Sleepy Joe is over. He's had after midterms, he had this huge second wind, and he's still riding it. And he seemed like, even just physically, he seemed more like alive.
Exactly.
Like even if you look at the pictures of him, like he looks a little yossified. Like he just, he's getting back into it. Like I have way more faith in Joe Biden right now than I did at the beginning of his presidency. I think a lot of people feel the same way on both, who are more moderate like me or who may even be further left, which was probably the base that liked him the least.
Yeah.
I think he's got a fighting chance.
The only reason is that he has chocolate chip ice cream every day for breakfast.
Chocolate chip. Yeah.
So moving on to our next topic, this was a great discussion, and I'm sure we'll see more as new information comes out. Our next topic is gun control. So according to the New York Times, by mid-April, there was already 160 mass shootings in the U.S. and in this year. Last year, there were 647 mass shootings. Gun violence is a realistic fear many Americans hold, and it's something that's in the news a lot recently. What do you think the effect of politicalization has had on this conversation and this argument?
Yeah, I think one giant thing that kind of has strayed both sides is, I think, kind of the message between both sides. One side is saying, we need guns, you can't take it away from us. And the other side is saying, we need all guns off of the streets. And it's getting misconstrued because I think in the middle, what a lot of people want to see is gun reform, but also acts of helping with mental health, helping more low-income communities, because this is where most of this violence is being seen. And so when we try to have this discussion, a lot of people struggle to get out of the mindset of it's either this or it's that. And there's more medium to that.
I agree with that. And I think I bring up this example every time I talk about gun control. But there's Nordic countries that have guns, that allow citizens to carry guns, but they have gun control measures that prevent things like mass shootings from happening. So I don't think it's about, taking away your guns versus keeping the guns, especially because there's so much money invested in the gun legislation and politics that it's going to be really difficult to get on one side or the other. But enacting legislation that stops gun shootings and gun violence from happening, and that stops school shootings from happening, is so, so important. And I think that there's been so many examples of this where legislators will focus on drag queens reading books to children, and that affects a very, very small portion of the population, versus gun violence that affects every single child in America. So I think it's really important to have just some kind of legislation, to have stricter gun laws about who can and who can't buy a gun, and what standards you need to meet to be able to purchase something that can take away someone's life.
I also think that there just needs to be more safety and more education on guns. I think a big problem that we have in the United States especially is when we think of a gun, we just think of something destructive. But it can be used as many other things, like an art form. It can be used in better lights as well. Obviously, I think that there should be guns that should be removed from the streets, like assault weapons. I don't think those have any right to be into the United States. I think those are only there to cause destruction. But I think if we could educate at a younger age how gun safety, how guns work, I think that would then further push for even more legislation in the future.
There was a person who gave an example in court recently where they said that you don't use assault rifles while hunting because there's nothing left. And so the fact that assault rifles are allowed in schools where you can shoot children and there's nothing left of them. Yeah. So, yeah.
I do believe that I support the Second Amendment. But first off, I think we need a rewrite, because it's like when you're reading Shakespeare and you're like, this is English, but this isn't my English. This isn't my version of English. It's hard to understand. It's hard to parse. It mentions militias, which really haven't been a thing for almost 200 years now. I think that we just need to get together as a bipartisan nation and rewrite that a little bit. That was a good first draft. Let's rewrite it in common English. And I do think that it's not too much to ask. A lot of the gun reforms that I see are just have a license for your gun.
Right.
I'm not planning on taking away your gun. I just want you to have a little slip of paper that said I have this gun, I own this gun, this is my gun, and I legally own this gun. It's not too much to ask. If I need a special piece of plastic to be able to get into my room here at Purdue and pay for my laundry here at Purdue, then I think for a weapon that could kill multiple people or multiple deer, I think I should have a little slip of paper for that too.
That's a great point. Yeah, so I really appreciate all of your guys' standpoints on that. And next up, we're going to talk about civic literacy, which is something that Purdue has really been pushing within the last couple of years. We know that's a new pathway that's been added. I know for several of us, if we're seniors, we may not have had to do that while we were here at Purdue. But civic literacy is defined as the knowledge and ability to contribute to a community and a greater society. So what do you believe is the most important way to go about this? And obviously there are certain examples of watching the news, reading the newspapers, going out of your way to do some research. So what do you guys think about that?
So I'm a liberal arts major, and that's why I think that having STEM majors be forced to take courses on things that educate them about what's happening around them is very, very important. It sort of breaks you out of your bubble, and the fact that it's a graduation requirement I think is good. Now, I haven't taken the civic literacy courses, so I don't know how comprehensive they are, but I think having a little bit more information on how comprehensive they are and do they achieve what they set out to achieve is important. But the idea as a whole, I think, is good.
I'm going to be super petty here for a minute. If I'm going to be forced to take a math class, they have to take a poli-sci class. It's just, it's fair, it's honest. And the way that it works is we live in a democracy. We are allowed input into we are supposed to have input into our government. You are supposed to go out and vote. That is your civic duty. And civic literacy is one of those things where it's like knowing how to write a check. It's like knowing how to do basic addition. You live in a democracy. Part of your duty is you got to know what you're doing when you go out to vote. That's all I want.
And we will have to wrap up soon, but I wanted to give you guys a chance to talk about PDC. I think this is a great kind of time to talk about it with civic literacy. A lot of what you guys do is allowing people a time to talk about things in a respectful and thoughtful way. So if you guys want to say a few things about your guys' club, I would love to give us a platform to do that.
Incoming president, go for it.
Well, I think this is a wild proposal that has had absolutely no thought put behind it until now. But I think, maybe for a civic literacy requirement, come to PDC.
We've tried.
That's all we do is civic literacy.
Exactly.
You learn, and so many people you think that you have to be knowledgeable about politics. You have to be a poli-sci major. They assume everyone's a poli-sci major. I mean, there's a lot of poli-sci majors for sure, but not everyone.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm not a poli-sci major.
Entomology.
You don't have to be. I'm an entomology major. We've had previous presidents who was what was Pietro? Chemistry?
Pietro was chemistry.
Yeah.
Sunil was
computer science.
Computer science.
Yeah.
Jose, vice president, now is math and chemistry.
Yeah, I mean, anyone can come, and you don't have to know about the topic beforehand. We release primers that we make beforehand with all the information you need to know to get you up to speed. And even if you don't want to participate, you can totally come and just sit and listen. I think it's just as good of an outlet to learn about politics and the things going on around you as it is to discuss those things.
Yeah. And if you guys want to be a part of these conversations that you guys heard today, go and give PDC a try. We had a great time today. It was a truly captivating and informative debate. We could not ask for a better panel. Thank you to all of you for coming and doing this with us.
Thank you so much for having us.
Up next, a see you later from Watching Washington.
Hi there, my name is Vikram Jaithlak and I'm the founder and president of the Purdue chapter of the University Blood Initiative. Over the past 2 years, we've been able to collect over 300 pints of blood to be donated to local hospitals, and you can be the next one to help out.
I donate my blood at the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative.
Hi, I just donated blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Right, I donated my blood through the University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
And I donated my blood at University Blood Initiative at Purdue.
Want to try something new? How about learning an Irish jig? Come leap into the semester with the Irish Dance Club. No experience is necessary, so come to a meeting at the Stewart Center from 7:30 to 8:30 p.m. Mondays and Wednesdays. See you there.
Being involved in the 3-year program at Purdue made it easier to say to myself I could get done in 3 years. The 3-year program helped save me a ton of money. Not completing my 4th year, I would save around $30,000. It will give you an advantage, if anything. Doing the 3-year program at Purdue has shown me that I have motivation to do whatever it takes to get my degree.
Again, I'm Allie Ortiz.
And I'm John Henry Henson.
And we'd like to once again thank our panel, the Purdue Political Discourse Club, for joining us today to discuss some major issues affecting the U.S. political landscape.
I thought it was a really great discussion from people on both sides of the aisle. I know even from watching myself, I learned a ton on issues ranging from gun control to abortion rights to internet privacy. So it was really, really great having an organization of students who are so civically engaged and well-spoken about topics that are really important, not only to young people, but people of all ages across the country.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like even coming into this debate panel, I had certain, ideas about certain topics, and hearing all of them discuss it, first of all, so eloquently, and being able to, speak about such important topics that affect all of us very personally, I think was very interesting and great to see people that are our age so educated. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
Without a doubt. Well, sadly, as the semester is coming to an end, this is our last show of the school year. It has been a pleasure keeping you informed on what's going on in our nation's capital.
See you in the fall for more political coverage, and as always, thank you for tuning in to Watching Washington.
What does mental health mean to me?
Mental health means to me.
Mental health means to me. I think it's essential.
Mental health, I think, is something that is not as acknowledged as physical health.
Putting my emotional well-being at the top of my priority list.
I would say it means taking care of my mind, body, and soul.
Mental health means to me checking in with myself and what I'm feeling.
I maintain my mental well-being by stopping to smell the roses.
I maintain my mental health by being able to set aside time to do things I enjoy.
I get my nails done a lot. That makes me feel nice.
Spending time with family, celebrating my sports teams, and exercising.
I just take some lazy days off through my schedule once or twice a week, depending on the level of burnout I feel.
By taking a step back and doing something I enjoy, such as cooking or hanging out with friends.
Mental Health Action Week.
Mental Health Action Week.
Mental Health Action Week.
All day.
All day.
All day.
Every day.
Every day.
Hello everyone, my name is Orion DeWitt. I am president of the Purdue Student Production Student Organization.
And I'm Mari Gergel. I am the publicist of the club.
The club is open to any student of any major, and we have opportunities for any club member to rent gear, which includes cameras, tripods, lights, anything you really need to make your own movie.
What's best is that you can help in any way that you want, so you can be an actor or help in the crew, be part of the cinematography, anything that you want, and you can make this an experience that is meaningful for you.
You should join Purdue Student Productions because it's a great networking opportunity for students both in production major and out of the production major.
If you want to get involved with the club, you can find us on Boilerlink or on Instagram at Purdue Student Productions. So if you want to make your own movies or be an actor, join PSP today.
The Center for C-SPAN, which is this organization, the CCSC, what we do is we facilitate like a bunch of organizations, different programs for Brian Lamb, which is the founder of C-SPAN. Anyone can be part of CCSC, whether it be through our various internships, our competitions, just to be involved, even like our student community meetings that we have every week. Anyone can go, you don't have to be communications or poli-sci. You just meet so many people, the connections you make is kind of crazy, the range that CCSC has. So yeah, it's just provided me so many opportunities to like kind of achieve the goals I have personally and forward to like whatever career paths I choose.
Are you looking for a new hobby?
Or you want to have a fun evening with your friends?
Then come climb to new heights at the Co-Rec Climbing Wall.
What does it take to be a Purdue tour guide? You've got to know your history. You have to know your facts. You've got to have that Purdue spirit. And you have to walk backwards.